They say that even in prison, love finds a way. But some places are built to crush that possibility. This story is not about freedom. It's about what survives when freedom is stripped away. In a place where men are numbers, not names. Where every glance could mean danger, and every secret could cost a life. One man found something unexpected, kindness, and then love. Not with a woman waiting on the outside, but with someone no one ever imagined. A pastor, a man of God, a man sworn to righteousness. And like every forbidden love, it came at a cost. It began with a handshake. It ended with a murder, brutal, humiliating, unforgivable. You're about to hear a story that was never meant to be told. A story buried behind concrete walls, between whispers of faith and flesh. A story that still echoes through the halls of Riverside Federal Penitentiary. This isn't fiction. This isn't rumor. This happened. A prisoner, a preacher, a forbidden affair, and a death that turned whispers into screams. This is the story of Eli Turner and Reverend Caleb Monroe, and the man who couldn't bear to see them alive. If you think love can't exist in a place like this, you haven't heard what happened yet. The first thing that hit Eli Turner wasn't the cold or the concrete or the smell of bleach. It was the silence. That eerie, thick silence of a place that had forgotten how to feel. Even the sounds, the metallic clank of steel doors, the barked orders of guards, were hollow, like echoes bouncing in a hollow shell. He stood there in line, naked under the fluorescent lights, clutching nothing but the last shreds of his dignity. But that, too, was about to be taken. "Bend over, spread 'em," came the officer's voice. Cold, mechanical, uninterested. Not cruel. Worse. Indifferent. Eli did what he was told. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He simply stopped being a person. Just for a moment. Just to get through it. The antiseptic they used in the communal showers stung his skin, leaving it raw and itchy. The uniform they gave him was 2 sizes too big, stiff with starch and the sweat of men who had worn it before. The number stitched across his chest was now his identity, not his name, not Eli Turner. Just number 412687. "Move!" barked a different guard. "Turner, follow me." They walked in silence through the corridors of Riverside Penitentiary. Gray walls, gray lights, gray faces. At every checkpoint, he was scanned, searched, stared at. Other inmates watched him, like wolves watching fresh meat. Some with curiosity, others with hunger. At the end of SE block, the guard stopped. "Cell 238. Your bunk's the top one. Your cellmate's Marcus Delgado. Keep your head down, Turner. Don't start nothing. Won't be nothing." The door opened with a screech. Inside sat a thick-shouldered man in his 50s with gray streaks in his hair and a long scar slicing through his left cheek. He was reading a paperback novel and didn't look up. "Welcome to hell," the man said dryly, flipping a page. "I hope you don't snore." The door slammed shut behind Eli, loud and final. He stood for a moment, clutching the prison-issued blanket and toiletries against his chest. No one had told him what to do next. "I'm Marcus," the man finally said, still not making eye contact. "Top bunk's yours. Don't touch my stuff. Don't borrow my soap. Don't ask questions." Eli nodded. "Got it." He climbed up to the top bunk. The mattress was thin, more like foam padding than anything meant for sleep. It smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant. On the ceiling above him, inmates had scratched messages over the years: names, dates, prayers, jokes, threats. A kind of crude journal of the forgotten. Eli stared up at the ceiling and repeated one sentence in his mind like a prayer. I shouldn't be here. But he was. And it would be 7 years before he saw the outside again. The first 3 days passed in a blur of noise, fear, and the gnawing ache of being completely alone in a place full of people. At 6:00 a.m. sharp, the siren screamed. They didn't just wake you up. They ripped you from whatever little dream you had left. Then came the roll call, the head count, the inspection, breakfast in the mess hall, assignment to labor. The mess hall had its own rules. Eli learned quickly. Don't sit at the Brotherhood table. Don't stare. Don't talk too much. Don't look weak. They're predators, Marcus had muttered on the first day. They're looking for prey. On the third day, Eli made a mistake. He sat in the wrong spot. A mountain of a man approached his table. Nicknamed Bull, he had arms like steel pipes and a jaw like a sledgehammer. His voice was loud, aggressive. Hey, pretty boy, Bull said, towering over him. You the one who stabbed that guy outside the liquor store? Eli kept his eyes on his oatmeal. It tasted like wet cardboard. I'm talking to you, Bull barked louder. You deaf or just stupid? Around them, the hall went quiet. Other inmates turned to watch. Waiting. Tested. Eli calmly set down his spoon and looked up. I'm just busy, he said evenly. A few snickers from nearby tables. Bull didn't like being laughed at. You think you're smart? Bull snarled. He smacked Eli's tray off the table, sending food splattering across the floor. This ain't the suburbs, college boy. Eli stood. Deliberately. I'm not looking for trouble, he said. His voice was steady, but his pulse was a drum in his throat. But I won't run either. Bull moved fast, faster than anyone his size should have. But Eli was ready. Years of construction work had hardened his reflexes. He ducked the first swing, then drove a tight punch into Bull's gut. The bigger man doubled over, gasping. Inmates around them shouted. Some laughed. Others backed away. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Then Bull reached for something under his sleeve. A shiv. Eli's eyes widened. But before anything else could happen, break it up. The guards were already there. Batons drawn. 2 of them tackled Bull. One slammed Eli against the wall. Hands behind your head, now! They cuffed both men. Eli didn't resist. The adrenaline still surged in his blood, but the fear had given way to something else. Clarity. 3 days in the SHU. Solitary confinement. Marcus didn't say anything when they took him away. Just gave a look that said, you made your choice. But in that tiny room, with no windows, no voices, just the buzz of the overhead light, Eli finally allowed himself to feel. And for the first time since his arrest, he cried. After 3 days in the SHU, the Special Housing Unit, or what most simply called the Hole, Eli Turner emerged quieter, leaner in spirit, but strangely more centered. Something had broken inside him, but something else had settled. Back in his cell, Marcus Delgado looked him over and said simply, you lasted. That counts. Then went back to his book. Eli said nothing. He didn't feel triumphant, just present. His new work assignment was in the laundry, hot, loud, and soaked in the stink of bleach and sweat. The machines roared like beasts, and no one talked much. But that was fine. After folding his 100th pair of pants, Eli found something comforting in the rhythm of repetition. The quiet labor dulled his thoughts, and maybe that's what he needed. But it was the library that saved him. A small room, barely the size of a classroom, with books stacked on metal shelves, many falling apart. But to Eli, it was an oasis, a place where he could disappear into stories that weren't his own. It was there he met Wilson, the inmate librarian. An older man, maybe 70, with clouded eyes and ink-stained fingers. Wilson didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice was warm, like old whiskey. "You're the new one," Wilson said one afternoon. "Heard you handled yourself with bull." Eli shrugged. "Just trying to survive, same as the rest of us." Wilson nodded, sliding a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo across the table. "Try this. Man gets framed, wrongfully imprisoned, spends years plotting revenge." Eli cracked a dry smile. "Sounds about right. You ever need to talk to someone," Wilson added, "try Monroe. Reverend Caleb Monroe. He's different." Eli raised an eyebrow. "I'm not really religious." Wilson shrugged. "You don't have to be. He listens. That's rare in here." Eli hesitated. He hadn't really talked to anyone about his case or the way his life had fallen apart in one violent instant. He wasn't ready to open that box, but something in Wilson's voice stayed with him. The next morning, curiosity, or maybe loneliness, got the better of him. After breakfast, instead of heading back to laundry, he asked a guard if he could visit the chapel. The guard looked at him strangely, but waved him through. The chapel wasn't much, just a small converted storage room with a simple wooden cross, mismatched pews, and a stained glass window that cast colored light onto the floor. But it was quiet, peaceful, and Eli hadn't felt peace in a long time. There were about a dozen inmates seated when he arrived. Some chatted in hushed tones. Others stared at the cross with empty eyes. Eli sat in the back row, near the door. He wasn't sure why he'd come. He just didn't want to be anywhere else. Then Reverend Caleb Monroe walked in. Eli expected someone old, stiff, maybe judgmental. Instead, Monroe was in his early 40s, with silver at his temples and eyes that looked like they had seen too much, but still searched for hope. He wore the standard chaplain's khaki, but he didn't carry a Bible or bark orders. He simply walked in and said, "Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you." His voice was warm and quiet, not performative, not exaggerated, just real. He didn't start with a sermon. He talked about the weather, a book he'd read, a funny story about one of the guards getting locked in a supply closet. Laughter rolled through the pews like a gentle breeze. Then his tone shifted, softer, measured. "Today," Monroe said, "I want to talk about something we don't often allow ourselves to feel. Forgiveness, but not the kind we ask from others, not even from God. I'm talking about the kind that's hardest to give, the kind we give ourselves." Eli's breath caught in his throat. The Reverend continued, "Some of you are here because you made mistakes. Some because life threw things at you that you couldn't dodge. Whatever the reason, we all carry guilt. But guilt, it can rot you from the inside if you let it." The words weren't poetic, they weren't dramatic, but they landed like stones in Eli's chest. He felt exposed, as if Monroe could see right through him, and yet he wasn't ashamed. "You're not defined by your worst day," the Reverend said. "You're defined by what you do next." Eli sat frozen. The silence in the room was no longer cold. It was reverent, reflective, honest. When the service ended, most of the inmates filtered out. Some grabbed the cheap store-brand cookies Monroe had placed in a plastic bowl near the door. A few stayed behind to say hello. Eli lingered. Monroe approached him. Up close, he looked more tired than he had from afar, but his gaze was steady. "I don't believe we've met," he said, extending a hand. "Caleb Monroe." "Eli Turner," Eli Sequid, shaking it. The Reverend's grip was firm, not soft like a man who only preached. It was the grip of someone who'd done real work in his life. "I'm glad you came," Monroe said. "How'd it feel?" Eli hesitated. "Different. Different's good," the Reverend replied with a half smile. "We're all a little different in here." Eli almost laughed. He didn't. But for the first time in weeks, he smiled. Eli didn't plan on going back to the chapel. He told himself it was enough. One visit, one conversation. Just a break from routine. Something to keep his mind occupied. But the truth was, Caleb Monroe had unsettled something in him. Eli wasn't a man who spoke easily. He'd never been the kind of person to open up. Not to strangers, not even to friends. But something about Monroe made silence unbearable. It wasn't just the Reverend's words. It was the way he looked at people. Like he still believed there was a person worth seeing beneath the scars, the crimes, the numbers on their shirts. So the next week, Eli went back. He sat in the same back row. Didn't say much. Didn't need to. The Reverend spoke again. This time about grief. About how it didn't follow rules. About how sometimes grief was just love, trapped in a place where it had nowhere to go. Eli hadn't thought of it that way, but it stuck to his ribs like food after a long fast. After the service, Monroe didn't approach him, but he did nod from across the room. Just once, just enough. It was the third week when Eli finally stayed behind. He lingered in the chapel long after the others had gone. He wasn't even sure why, until Monroe appeared beside him, quietly, like he'd been waiting. "Want to talk?" the Reverend asked. Eli didn't answer right away. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to," Monroe said gently. "We can just sit." So they did. It became a habit after that. Once a week, then twice. Then, whenever Eli could find a reason to drop by the chapel, or Monroe's tiny office tucked behind it, filled with books, a coffee pot, and an old leather chair that smelled like dust and old sermons, their conversations started light. Books, family, music, life before prison. But slowly, like ice thawing in spring, Eli started to share the things he'd buried. He told Monroe about the night that changed everything. How he saw a man trying to drag a little girl behind a gas station. How instinct took over. How a broken bottle ended a life. "I didn't mean to kill him," Eli whispered one night. "I just wanted to stop him." Monroe didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low. "I believe you. You're not going to say it was still a sin?" "I'm not here to judge," the Reverend said. "I'm here to see you, the you sitting in front of me." Eli didn't realize he was crying until he saw the tear hit the floor. No one had ever looked at him like that. Not in court, not in prison. As if he wasn't just a case file or a number. As if he was still human. He began to look forward to those meetings, like a starving man waits for a meal. The days in the laundry, the noise of the mess hall, the grim stare of guards, it all blurred into gray. But those hours in Monroe's office were in color. He learned that Monroe had once been married, that he tried for years to live the life expected of him, a good husband, a rising young preacher in a conservative denomination. But he never felt right in his own skin. He felt like a puppet mouthing scripture, never speaking truth. Eventually, he stopped pretending. The divorce nearly ended his career. He asked to be reassigned to prison ministry. Figured if I couldn't fake it anymore, at least I could be somewhere the masks had already fallen off. Eli listened. He listened hard, because what Monroe said about hiding, about shame, about being afraid of your own skin, it felt like it was coming from inside Eli's chest. I never thought I'd talk to a priest, Eli said one evening, half laughing, much less wait all week just to do it again. I'm not really a priest, Monroe replied with a smirk, just a tired man with a coffee pot and too many questions of his own. Their hands brushed once, a mistake maybe, or maybe not, but the silence that followed was electric. Eli pulled away first. He didn't know what that touch meant. He didn't want to know, but he kept thinking about it. The next time, when Monroe handed him a book, their fingers lingered longer. This time, Monroe didn't pull away. Eli looked up. So did he. And in that moment, long and quiet and breathless, something passed between them that neither could name, but both understood. Desire. Recognition. Fear. Eli. Monroe's voice was soft. This is dangerous. I know. You're a prisoner. I know, Eli whispered, but I don't care. And he meant it. He hadn't felt warm in months. Hadn't felt seen. Hadn't felt anything but cold, guilt, and silence. But here, in this room, something lived again. Monroe didn't kiss him that day, but they both knew it was coming. It started with a knock, a soft one. Not the urgent rap of trouble, just the hesitant touch of someone unsure if they were welcome. Caleb Monroe opened the door to his office and found Eli Turner standing there, holding a book. I thought maybe we could talk, Eli said, trying not to sound like it mattered too much. But it did, and they both knew it. Monroe stepped aside. Come in. His office was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the desk lamp. The air smelled like old pages and instant coffee. Outside, the prison buzzed with fluorescent hums and metal clicks. But in here, time bent inward. They talked about the book first, East of Eden. But the conversation wandered, as it always did, from Steinbeck to childhood. From childhood to the ache of becoming someone you never planned to be. Eli spoke slowly, like walking barefoot across broken glass. Caleb listened the way some men pray, with his whole body. At one point, he reached for the coffee pot and poured 2 cups. As he handed Eli the mug, their fingers brushed again. This time, neither looked away. I keep thinking about it, Eli said quietly. Staring into the steam, Caleb didn't ask what. I know what you meant when you said it was dangerous, Eli continued. But the worst part is, even knowing that, I still want to be near you. The Reverend was silent for a moment. Then, me too. That admission hung between them like the scent of something forbidden. When it finally happened, it was clumsy and perfect. They were in the back storage room of the chapel, organizing donated books. A moment of laughter turned into a glance that lingered too long. Then a touch on the wrist. Then breath on breath. The first kiss was hesitant, testing. The second wasn't. Time folded. Books fell to the floor. Hands, desperate and shaking, reached beneath clothes that had become cages. Their mouths found each other again and again, like gasping for air after too long underwater. It wasn't about lust, it was about feeling human again. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and undone, neither spoke for a long while. Eli was the first to find words. "I don't regret it." Caleb looked at him, eyes raw and unguarded. "Neither do I." But after that night, the world around them felt different. It wasn't just love anymore. It was danger. Because someone had noticed. Officer Nate Harlow was new to the chapel rotation. A man with a stiff posture and eyes like cold marbles. He never smiled, never joked. And he watched Caleb too closely. The first time Eli noticed it, he brushed it off. The second time, he couldn't. "I think he's watching us," Eli said one night in Monroe's office. "I know," Monroe replied. "He checks the chapel when you're not there, talks to inmates, asked Wilson about our conversations." Monroe rubbed his temple. "We'll be more careful." But careful was never enough. One afternoon, they nearly got caught. They were in the storage room again, hands barely off each other. When the door creaked open, Eli jumped back. Monroe turned to face the shelves. It was Harlow. "Sorry, Reverend," he said, too polite. "Didn't know you had company." Monroe didn't flinch. "Turner's helping with inventory." "Is he?" Harlow stepped further in. His eyes swept the room. The disheveled books, the slight flush in Monroe's cheeks. "Just checking." When he left, Eli could barely breathe. "He knows," he whispered. "I know," Caleb said, "and that scares me more than anything." Because Harlow wasn't just a rule follower. He was the kind of man who needed power over others to make sense of his own weakness. And now, he had a reason to destroy them both. That night, Eli barely slept. His dreams were flashes. Caleb's face, Harlow's glare, a door slamming shut. They met less often after that, and when they did, it was brief, coded, guarded, smiles behind closed doors, hands that brushed but didn't linger. The tension was unbearable. Love had turned into a high-wire act. One step wrong, and it all would collapse. One night, as they sat side by side on the chapel pew, Monroe whispered, "If this gets worse, I'll ask for a transfer. Get reassigned." Eli turned sharply. "No, it might protect you." "No, Caleb," Eli said, gripping his hand tightly. "I already lost everything. I'm not losing you too." And then he added quietly, "Don't leave me in this place alone." The Reverend closed his eyes. "I won't. Not unless you ask me to." They sat like that until the lights flickered, warning the inmates to return to their cells. They didn't kiss. They didn't say goodbye, but it felt like something sacred had just passed between them. A week passed. Then two. They were careful. They met only in daylight, only in public. Their conversations became lighter, their glances shorter, their hands never touched. But their silence carried a weight, and Harlow never stopped watching. One night, as Eli was returning from chapel, Harlow intercepted him in the corridor. "You spend a lot of time with the Reverend," he said, voice low and smooth, like oil hiding a blade. Eli kept walking. "He helps me, like he helps others." Harlow stepped in front of him. "Oh, I'm sure he helps you. Helps you real good." Eli met his eyes. "Is there a problem?" Harlow leaned in. His breath smelled of spearmint and something rotten beneath. "My father taught me what to do with men like you," he whispered. "Said you gotta root out the sickness before it spreads." Eli didn't flinch. But later, in the darkness of his bunk, his heart wouldn't stop racing. He told Caleb everything the next day. The Reverend went pale. "He said that," Caleb whispered. "Exactly like that?" Word for word. Caleb sat down slowly, staring at the cross on the wall, like it had stopped meaning anything. "I think he knows," Eli said. "Not just suspects. Knows." Caleb nodded. "And it's killing him." "What do we do?" can't go to the warden," Caleb said. "If I report him, he'll double down. I've seen men like him. They don't get scared, they get mean. So we wait for him to act, we stay careful. We put distance between us. No more meetings, no more glances, no more risk." Eli clenched his fists. "You think distance is going to save us? I think it's the only chance we have." That night, Eli sat on his bunk, clutching the leather-bound prayer book Caleb had once given him. It wasn't about religion. It was about him. The way Caleb's hand had trembled when he passed it over. The quiet care in his eyes. The warmth Eli had thought he'd never feel again. He wasn't ready to let that go. But death was already circling. 3 days later, Caleb didn't show up for the afternoon service. That had never happened. Eli paced his cell. Marcus watched silently, sensing the shift in the air. When dinner came, still no Monroe. Eli couldn't eat. It was late when the news came. A whisper, a rumor, a shockwave. There was a fight. Cell block D. Someone got killed. Eli froze. His throat dried. His heart stopped. Then came the name. Soft. Distant. Like a punch behind glass. The Reverend. They found him in the administration wing, alone. Face down in a toilet, drowned. Left there like garbage. The chapel was locked down for a week. Eli didn't speak. Didn't cry. He didn't even sleep. He just lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The last kiss. The last time their fingers touched. The last time Caleb whispered, "I won't leave you." But he was gone now, and somewhere in the shadows, Harlow walked free. No one questioned Eli officially at first, but he knew it would come. And when it did, when a detective finally summoned him for questioning, he was ready. Detective Rachel Connors was sharp-eyed and quiet. She didn't accuse, she observed. "You knew Reverend Monroe well," she said. Eli nodded. "He helped me." "How often did you meet?" "A few times a week, sometimes more." "Why?" "Because he listened." Connors looked at him carefully. "And did you love him?" Eli met her eyes, slowly, deliberately. "Yes." She didn't blink. "Did Officer Harlow know?" "I think he did. I think it drove him mad." Connors nodded. "He's our prime suspect." And then? Eli made a choice. He told her everything. The conversations, the threats, the look in Harlow's eyes, the smell of his breath, and finally, the rumor he heard about new cleaning chemicals in the admin bathrooms. The kind that stained fabric blue. "Check his sleeves," Eli said. "He'd have to hold Caleb down. If he used that toilet, the dye would be on his cuffs." 2 days later, Harlow was arrested. Blue chemical stains, surveillance footage, inconsistencies in his report. He didn't deny it. He smiled and said, "My father would be proud." After Officer Nate Harlow was taken away, handcuffed and silent, something changed in the air at Riverside Penitentiary. The halls felt quieter. The chapel, reopened a few days later, was emptier. The light still poured through the stained glass window in golden streaks, but it felt hollow. Eli Turner sat in the last pew, the same one where he'd first seen Reverend Caleb Monroe, the same one where he had first, quietly, unknowingly, begun to fall in love. He pulled the worn prayer book from his pocket, the one Caleb had given him. Its pages were soft, the corners bent, the spine cracked from years of use. Caleb's initials were written on the inside cover, next to a quote, "To be seen is to be loved." Eli ran his fingers over those words. He didn't cry. He had no more tears. Detective Connors came back one last time to speak with him, not to question, but to explain. "Harlow confessed," she said quietly. He said it wasn't just about you. It was about what Caleb represented. He said men like him were a disease. Said God had rules. Said his father taught him how to cleanse the world. Eli said nothing. What he did to Caleb, Connors continued, her voice tight with disgust, was personal. It wasn't just murder, it was hate. Then let that be how he's remembered, Eli said. Not Caleb. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. The prison is keeping the investigation internal. They'll say it was violence during the riot, nothing more. Because it's easier. Yes, but not truer. No, she admitted. But it's the only way to protect you. I don't care anymore, Eli said. Let them know. Let them hear. He was the only good thing I had left. But Connors just shook her head. This place buries what it can't understand, she said. But you don't have to bury him. You carry him. And with that, she left. The next day, Eli asked permission to go to the chapel alone. A new guard stood watch now. A younger man. Quiet, respectful. 15 minutes, he said. Then I have to lock up. Eli nodded. Inside, the chapel was still. Peaceful. The cross on the wall glowed with the last light of day. The colors danced across the pews like a memory trying not to fade. He walked to the front, sat in the same seat Caleb used to sit in when he waited for everyone else to leave. He placed the prayer book on the seat beside him. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." There was no reply, just silence. But somehow, in that silence, Eli felt something stir. Not words, not signs, just presence. A warmth that didn't belong in a prison. A stillness that felt like forgiveness. A flicker of something eternal. He stayed until the guard tapped gently on the door. Time. Eli stood. He took the prayer book, held it close. As he turned to leave, he looked back once, just once, at the place where he had loved and lost. And then he stepped into the fading light. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if, even for a moment, it reminded you of the quiet strength of love and the terrible cost of hate, then don't let it fade away. Leave a comment below. Tell us, have you ever seen love survive in an impossible place? Have you ever lost someone and carried them with you ever since? We read every story, we listen, and if you'd like to hear more real stories like this one, stories about the people forgotten behind bars, the love that dared to exist, and the pain that still echoes long after the gates close, then please, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who still believes in love. Because sometimes stories like this are how we remind each other that even in the darkest places, light still exists.